Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to our webinar today, DMARC 101. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us. We're probably going to need you for around about half an hour, 40 minutes, depending on how many questions we have at the end of this. First things first, before I introduce Elliot, I'd just like to say in the Teams interface, you will find somewhere probably up there, I guess, there'll be a Q&A button. If you hit that, you can pop your questions in the chat there. We will have time to cover those off at the end. But the key thing is, I'd really like to welcome Elliot Wilkie from Brigantia. Elliot, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And Elliot is the resident DMARC and DKIM expert, so he's going to talk about lots of stuff that I understand the concepts around, but I'm certainly not an expert. I think he's going to do it in following the one fixed guidelines of no geek speak, so I think he's going to keep this nice and high level and easy for everybody to understand. So I think straight over to you, Elliot. I'll let you share your screen and crack on. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, so let me start sharing my screen and we'll just have a bit of a run through today as to essentially what DMARC is and also how it's going to kind of impact on your businesses in terms of if you do have it, what you should be doing, or if you don't have it, why you should be starting to look at it today. And as Craig rightly mentioned, this is going to be no geek speak. There will be a little bit of acronyms here and there, but I will 100% make sure that everyone is on the same page throughout today's session. And if anybody doesn't have any, if someone does need some clarification, then please feel free to pop the question into the Q&A box, and I'm more than happy to kind of answer that towards the end of the session. So the first kind of area that we really need to focus on today is just around the kind of general problem with email that a lot of organizations that I'm speaking to are seeing at the moment. We can see we've got a big red figure at the top there of 91% of cybercrimes are initiated via email. And truth be told, that's maybe not a particularly surprising figure. If you think about the number of communications that you're doing between yourself and your suppliers or your clients or the rest of the world, that's primarily done via email. So you're utilizing email to utilize that kind of conversation and use that method of communication to speak to people. It's primarily email that you're utilizing for that. More and more often, we're finding that threat actors are realizing this, and that's why we're seeing that 91% figure, because let's be honest, it's the most prolific type of communication for businesses to utilize rather than phone calls or Teams messages or whatever else it might be. Emails tends to be the most obvious kind of attack route in for threat actors. But there's 4 other key areas that we really want to be focusing on today. And we can see there that the first one on the top left around impersonation. So when we're talking about impersonation in the context of email, what we're looking at is somebody that is sending an email on behalf of your actual email address. So we're not talking about lookalike email addresses or someone's changed an I to a 1. We're talking about the actual email address that you utilize, and somebody is sending out an email from that email address. And that's an email address that you own or you utilize day to day. And that's known as an impersonation attack, sometimes referred to as a spoof attack if somebody has kind of come across that in the past. Now, in your mind, you might be thinking, well, hold on a minute, how can that be possible? The threat actors or the hackers or whatever you want to call them, they don't have access to any of my systems that I utilize to send out these emails. We utilize Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, or, we've got other tools that we utilize to send out emails, but they shouldn't have access to those systems. So how is it that they are able to send out those emails? And it really comes back to the fact that email was originally created 40, 50 years ago as a communication standard between, getting a message from point A to point B as fast as possible. Back when email was created, cybersecurity just wasn't a thing. People didn't envisage that someone could essentially weaponize email as a threat source and as a way to try and use it for nefarious activities. And as a result of that, it's meant that we're constantly having to kind of make it more secure, but we're essentially bandaging up something that has been created as something that it's not really used in the same way today as it was when it was first created. And because of this, it does mean that threat actors can just basically start utilizing an email sending service. It can be anything around the world, and they just dictate that this email needs to come from this email address, and they'll dictate that to be your actual email address. And we want to stop that from happening as much as possible. The next side of it is interception. And when we're sending an email from point A to point B, so you're sending it from yourself to your client, it doesn't just magically appear in your client's inbox. It does need to go through a transit process. And during that transit process, we can sometimes find a threat actor or a hacker sitting in the middle, and they intercept an email, and they will then change the contents of that email before finally delivering it on to the intended recipient. And what they'll tend to do is they'll tend to sit in the middle. They can monitor all these emails that are coming through, and they'll find one that is particularly juicy, if you like. It will be an email whereby it's like a change of bank details notice or something like that. And they'll see that. They'll then change the bank details so it goes back to the threat actor rather than yourselves. And then they'll deliver that email onto the client. The client then ends up paying the money into the wrong bank account, which obviously we really want to prevent that from happening. And really, we want to stop that from happening day to day, because otherwise you're going to end up losing money. Your clients will start to lose money as well. And that's really going to not be good for anybody's business. The other side of it, moving away from that cybersecurity conversation, is much more around email deliverability. So a lot of conversations, as I've been mentioning, I've been having with clients, and a lot of them are saying to me, Elliot, a lot of my emails are actually ending up either in the junk folder of the recipient or are actually just being bounced. And there's no real kind of obvious reason as to why that's happening. You know, what's going on? What can we do to support this? And what we're going to be talking about today can help support email deliverability. Make sure that your emails actually end up in the intended recipient's inbox, rather than being caught by a spam filter, or rather than being just straight up rejected. And we need to make sure that those emails do get delivered for everyone's benefit. And the other side of it as well is, as of right now, if you are not utilizing DMARC, you do not have any visibility on what's happening to your email after you've clicked that send button. You're sort of just clicking the send button to send that email, and we're just hoping and praying that the email then does end up in the recipient's inbox, unless they tell us otherwise via maybe an email saying, hey, by the way, your email was in the junk folder, or it was a straight bounce back to you, and you maybe get like a report to tell you that your email didn't get delivered. So just to give you a quick example of an impersonation attack, we can see here that Ronald McDonald has sent an email across to me, and you can see that this genuinely came from a ronald.mcdonald@mcdonalds.com, and it says, hi, Elliot, please find the following invoice attached. I'm traveling at the moment, so please will you pay this urgently so that the supplier can continue working on the project. The project's been put on hold because the invoice was not processed correctly. Now, looking at this email, one of the things that I would be doing as somebody who works in cybersecurity day in, day out, and something that you might be doing as well, is you'll be looking at this email going, okay, where are the red flags? Is there anything in here that indicates to me that this might be an attack? And one of the first things that I would do is I would go straight to where we've got the email here. I'll just quickly highlight this. So we've got the email up at the top here, and I'll be looking at this to see, is that genuinely coming from ronald.mcdonald@mcdonalds.com? Because how many times, especially with your personal emails, have you received an email from someone where the from name looks to be someone that you maybe know or someone quite important, but then you look at the actual email address and it's just a random string of letters and numbers at Yahoo or something like that. And really what we want to do, that's one of the things that we're utilizing as a way to identify if it's coming from a threat actor. But if there's somebody impersonating Ronald here, then I'm not going to be able to know that based on the email address itself. And I'm going to see that and I'll go, oh, it's genuinely come from ronald.mcdonald@mcdonalds.com. So yes, I speak to Ronald on a regular basis. So I feel like I can trust this email and I'll pay this invoice that was attached within there, which actually in this case, because it was an impersonation attack, means that I've actually just paid a threat actor however many thousands of pounds, which obviously then culminates into quite a lot of different areas of damage, if I'm honest. So for one, deposit fraud, I've already mentioned that already, where people's paying money into the wrong bank accounts or threat actors' bank accounts rather than the intended supplier. And that obviously results in a loss of money across kind of both organizations, really. The other side of it is ransomware distribution. So ransomware, for those in today's session that are not aware of what ransomware is, it is whereby a threat actor or a hacker has managed to get access to your systems and they lock everything down. You lock access to your files or certain systems, and the only way that you can get access back to them is by paying a ransom, hence ransomware. And that is usually paid to the threat actor via cryptocurrency, because cryptocurrency cannot be tracked. And then it means you then tend to get access back to your systems. 99% of the time, sometimes the threat actors will actually not allow you to get access back to your files, maybe try and extort more money out of you. But the reason why I'm talking about ransomware is because if somebody was to send an email on behalf of your domain, which is a well-trusted domain, your actual email address that you're utilizing to send out emails day to day, and they send that to a client of yours, and it's maybe you're releasing a new product and there's a new product data sheet, and you send it to your clients, and they then click on that apparent data sheet, but it turns out to be ransomware, well, they're much more likely to click on it because it looks like something that's genuinely coming from you, especially because when they're looking at that impersonation email address, it looks like it is coming from you. So it's much easier for threat actors to distribute ransomware based on the emails that they're sending out, and it's coming from the email address that is essentially already trustworthy. Identity theft as well is a key one, and this is sort of twofold, really. The first being, if a threat actor is sending out emails on behalf of your actual email address, then it's basically somebody purporting themselves to be you, and in essence, they're stealing your identity. But the other side of it is, if you think about it more from a perspective of maybe a threat actor is impersonating an HR at email address of your domain, and they're sending it inbound into your organization, and it's saying something along the lines of, we're needing to update our systems. Please, can you just let us know your date of birth, your home address, the bank details that you need your payments to be paid into, and your full name, and maybe something like your spouse name or something like that as well. And that would be enough for a threat actor to then go away and maybe take out credit agreements in employees' names. And they're essentially not only doing identity theft, but they're doing credit theft and credit fraud as well. And this all culminates into reputational damage. If you think about it, if an email is coming from your actual email address or a domain of yours, and it's being sent to one of your clients, and that had ransomware, who is your client going to be pointing the finger back? Well, they're going to be pointing it at you, because from their perspective, you've been involved in a data breach or you've been compromised somehow, and therefore they're thinking, well, I don't want to work with you any longer because actually you've been compromised in some form. But if we just go back to the beginning, when I was talking about how email is a 40, 50-year-old kind of communication standard, it's not got anything to do with you being compromised. It's just a matter of the fact that a threat actor is just utilizing the way that email works and is then sending out emails on behalf of your email address. And really, we want to prevent that from happening. So we can see here that we've got this kind of existing protection that most organizations have in place. Whether you're utilizing something like Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Defender, maybe there are other solutions out there that you happen to be utilizing, Proofpoint, Mimecast, Sophos are probably the big names out there. At Brigantia, we actually utilize a tool called Hornet Security. And basically the intention of those services is to protect your staff and to protect any sort of incoming attacks coming into your organization. And threat actors are getting a wise to the fact that these solutions are in place. So they're starting to change their focus, because realistically, attackers, they're looking for the low-hanging fruit. And the low-hanging fruit is actually going to be your suppliers, it's going to be your customers, or the rest of the world. And they're essentially utilizing your domain to try and get access to those organizations, because at the end of the day, they actually trust your emails and your domain. And because of that, they'll be much more likely to get success by compromising your suppliers and customers in the rest of the world. And really what we want to do is we want to protect against that. And that's where Sendmarc and DMARC then comes in. So as I mentioned, we've been talking a little bit around DMARC, and DMARC comes and basically just covers off those 4 key pillars that we see on the left-hand side. So it protects against impersonation attacks, most of what I've been talking about already, but it also helps protect against interception attacks. So where somebody is sitting in the middle, they intercept that email and they change the contents of that email. So DMARC can help with that. On top of that, DMARC also helps with ensuring that the emails do end up in the intended recipient's inbox. And with that, we need to make sure that actually, great, we've now got understanding of what's going on. We know that these emails are going into the inbox. And an added benefit of that is that you will now get visibility of those outbound emails, make sure that they do end up in the recipient's inbox, so that we can ensure that the services that we're utilizing and the emails that we're sending out are actually being received there. Unfortunately, for now, I'm going to have to just quickly talk about a few acronyms. There may be kind of some geek talk here. I try and keep it as high level as possible, but we can see here that we've got SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to be going into the technicalities of what these actually are, but DMARC itself does not exist without SPF and DKIM there. So SPF, which stands for Sender Policy Framework, to use an analogy, it's like an invite list into a party. If you are not in the invite list, you're not allowed into the party, is the general idea around it. What this actually means is when you're utilizing tools to send out emails on behalf of your domain, utilizing, say, something like Microsoft 365, or maybe use a marketing tool like MailChimp or HubSpot or SendGrid, or utilizing a finance tool like Sage, and they're all sending emails utilizing your actual domain, you need to tell the world that you utilize those services. But otherwise, those recipients might not trust that email that's coming into you, or coming into them, sorry. And as a result of that, we need to essentially put Microsoft, HubSpot, Sage, all onto this invite list. At the same time, there's also another standard called DKIM, Domain Keys Identified Mail, but really you don't need to remember that. What it does is it's like a wax seal on a letter. Now, there's two main purposes to a wax seal. The first being that the seal itself is unique to the sender. So that means when the recipient receives a letter and it's got that wax seal, they know where it's come from unequivocally because of the fact that it's got that unique seal. The other side of it is that the seal itself also acts as a deterrent or as an identifier if the letter itself has been intercepted in transit and the contents of the letter has been changed. So if I received a letter and it had a broken wax seal, then I would know not to trust the contents of that letter because it's likely to have been tampered with. And DKIM is the modern day email equivalent of the wax seal. And because of that, it means we can now tell recipients, if you receive an email that has a broken wax seal, then maybe you shouldn't trust it. But the inherent problem of SPF and DKIM is that basically you are leaving the decision up to the recipient to decide what should they do with an email in the event that both SPF and DKIM fail. Or in other words, the email is coming from a source that isn't Microsoft or HubSpot or MailChimp, and either it doesn't have a wax seal or the wax seal has been broken. What should the recipient do in that scenario? And as the person who's sending that, I would want to have control over that. I would, as the domain owner, want to be able to tell the recipient, I want you to do something when that fails, rather than leaving the decision up to them, because actually, in most scenarios, when SPF and DKIM fail, the email will still be delivered into the inbox. And we don't want that to happen because it can result in all those damages that we saw earlier on. And that is where DMARC comes in. DMARC is like the bouncer at the party. It's telling people whether or not they're allowed to come in. Does that email pass SPF? Does it pass DKIM? And if they both don't, then you're telling your bouncer, right, this is what you should do. And it's going to be one of 3 different configurations. And it looks a little bit complicated because we've got this P equals thing. Basically, this is our configuration for DMARC. So to begin with, we're at this P equals none stage. Now, at this stage, there is no protection at all. And the purpose of this P equals none stage is to essentially start getting reports back on what emails were coming from my domain. And these can be either legitimate emails or they can be malicious emails. But the purpose behind it is to allow us to make sure that we have both told, we've put both the sending services that we're utilizing to send out emails on behalf of our domain, we've put those onto the invite list. And at the same time, we have also made sure that each one of those senders, Microsoft, MailChimp, HubSpot, they have all added the wax seal onto the letter, because if they haven't, that can cause email deliverability issues. So the P equals none stage is incredibly important for us to make sure that everything has been done properly. What we then want to do is move to P equals quarantine. and that will tell the recipients of an email coming from your domain. If that email fails SPF and DKIM, in other words, it's not on the invite list and there's no wax seal, or the wax seal's been broken, then I want you to put that email into either the junk folder, or better yet, if there's one available, put it into a quarantine environment. The inherent problem of this, of course, is the recipients could still go into the junk folder or the quarantine. They could release that email and still click on a malicious attachment, because at the end of the day, people still just make mistakes. People are human at the end of the day. They may have not just seen the red flags and trusted something when maybe they shouldn't have. So the most secure form of DMARC, and where we really want to get to, is P equals reject. And you are telling the recipients, in the event where SPF and DKIM fail, then I want you to bounce that email. And in doing so, you are protecting the recipients of that email there. Now, the question tends to come up at this point, well, why not just go straight to P equals reject? And the purpose for this is because if you went straight to P equals reject, you would be telling recipients to bounce emails that were not on the invite list and did not have a wax seal on the letter. But if you happen to have emails that were coming out legitimately, maybe a service that you're genuinely utilizing, that happened to not be on the invite list and the wax seal was not there, you would be telling recipients to bounce it, even though it would be illegitimate. Because at the end of the day, computers are both very smart because they're able to do lots and lots of things all at once, but they're also all quite stupid because you need to tell them exactly what to do. And on top of that, they don't have any context as to what's happening. They can't just go, oh, it looks like it came from someone, so I'll just deliver it. They'll just go, it doesn't meet the criteria, I'm just going to get rid of it. So we need to make sure that all the services that we use to send out emails, your Microsofts, your HubSpot, your MailChimps, they've all been configured properly. They're all set up properly so that we can get to that P equals reject stage to fully protect the recipients. I'm going to visualize this process because a lot of it I've been talking in concepts and talking about, what would happen if this happened and what would occur if that happened. And I'm going to visualize this a bit more because I'm sure some people on today's session are maybe more visual learners. So let's say, for example, you are sending an email into me, and maybe that email is going to be coming from your Microsoft 365 environment. So that's a legitimate email that's coming in to my environment. And what my mail server is what is receiving this email, what it does is it will then query your domain name system, your DNS. Now, that is where your DKIM, your SPF, and your DMARC is all located. That's how I know if the wax seal is okay, and it's how I know if that's on the invite list, and it's all located there. And what I would be checking is to see, have you put Microsoft onto the invite list? Yes, you have. Okay, fantastic. So I can trust the email is coming from Microsoft. On top of that, has that email got the wax seal? Yes, it does. Has the wax seal been broken? No, it hasn't. So I can then trust that email and deliver that email straight into Elliot's recipient inbox. Now, if there's an impersonated email coming from your email address, then my mail server, again, is going to check your DNS because it's coming from your actual email address. So I'm then seeing, is the threat actor, wherever the email has come from by the threat actor, but are they publishing or are they on the invite list? Well, no, they won't be. So it's going to fail SPF as a result. On top of that, is the wax seal on the letter? And truthfully, 95% of the time, a threat actor won't even bother putting the wax seal on the letter. But even if they did, the wax seal, with the way that DKIM works, would just immediately break. And because of that, that's why threat actors don't tend to do it. But now I'm in this scenario as my recipient environment. I've received this email from you that now fails SPF and DKIM. So what should I do with that email? Now, if we go back to earlier on where we see these three different scenarios, if you're publishing P equals reject, then my mail server would then bounce that email back to the attacker. And because of that, it means that my environment is now secure, but the legitimate emails still do get delivered. So there's no concern around email deliverability. If anything, we may have spotted issues, and that's allowed us to be able to make the necessary changes and ensure legitimate emails get delivered, but the threat actors' emails do not get delivered. Now, in both scenarios, a report is then generated. And that report we want to bring into Sendmarc. Now, to be completely transparent, DMARC is something that you can do for free. It's absolutely possible to do it for free. But we want to utilize Sendmarc. And the reason why is because the report that you receive looks like this. Now, I'm going to actually go through this in a bit of detail. It doesn't look pretty, but if we scroll a bit further down, we can actually see, if I just bring the laser pointer up here again, we have a date range within here. The laser pointer doesn't actually work inside of there. So that we've got a date range within here. So we can see, okay, there's the begin, there's the end. But I'm sure nobody on here recognizes this as any date range that we recognize as a standard day, month, year format, or vice versa. This just looks like a random string of numbers. What's going on here? And this is presented in what's known as epoch time. There's the number of seconds between the from now until the 1st of January 1970. And that's what this is demonstrating here. But as a human, I don't know what that actually means. So I'll then need to go away, put that through some form of kind of translator or calculator to then work out what does that actually make sense for us. On top of that, if I scroll a bit further down, we can then see that it does tell us where did that email come from. So is it coming from Microsoft or MailChimp or HubSpot? Except the way it presents that data back is what's known as an IP address. In other words, where is the address that the computer is looking for to receive that email. And the problem is that as a human, I'm not going to memorize every single one of these IP addresses that we see here. I might know one or two as somebody who's technical in terms of services that I genuinely utilize, but I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's Microsoft or MailChimp or HubSpot. So I'll need to go away and then work out what that is. And what this is really indicating is that this is complicated data, and the data it presents requires me to go and look up some stuff as well. And as a result, this becomes quite time consuming. So time consuming, in fact, that this actually, by the way, only represents one email. Now, at Brigantia, we send about 5,000 emails per week. They're thereabouts, sometimes more, sometimes less. And if it just took me 1 minute to go through this report, it would take me 85 hours to go through every single report that we get every single week. So that's not just 85 hours once and then we're done. It's every single week, constantly. And that is why it's so important that we need to put all of this information into a dashboard. One such example, actually, we utilize 4 different sending services. So we utilize Microsoft 365, we utilize HubSpot, we've got something that's in Amazon, and we've got Salesforce, our CRM. Over the last 6 months, we have sent in excess of 160,000 emails, which is a lot, which then means we generate 160,000 of these. And what that also means is that with Salesforce, we very rarely use Salesforce. But what we actually found was that only 6 of those 160,000 emails had come from Salesforce. To try and find those 6 emails manually, going through all of these reports would be near on impossible. And that is exactly why Google actually recommends that you use a third-party service. You can see it there. And actually, if you just type in Google DMARC, one of the first links that you'll get is like a Google Workspace kind of admin support page. You'll actually see that. You'll see this where it says about halfway down the page that you need to get help from a third-party service. And truth be told, this is not Google themselves trying to flog their own service. They don't have a service that they have to offer. This is Google saying you need to use a third-party tool because the DMARC reports are far too complicated. Okay. Last couple of slides. Appreciate I've gone a little bit over the half an hour than I thought we originally would. We've got some recent changes that have happened recently. So initially, Microsoft had joined the DMARC brigade. So initially, Google and Yahoo came out with an announcement to say you need to have DMARC if you are a bulk sender. In other words, somebody who sends more than 5,000 emails in a day. Now, Microsoft actually were notably absent with that. And they then announced at the beginning of April that you need to have DMARC in place if you're a bulk sender. Great, they've joined the brigade. They said you need to be you need to have DMARC in place by the beginning of May. So it's from the 2nd of April to the 5th of May was the 2 dates. So 2nd of April is when they announced it. 5th of May was when you needed to implement it. 1 week before the implementation, they actually changed a little bit. So initially they said, if you have no DMARC in place, then we will put your email into the junk folder. Except they now changed that and said, actually, we're just going to bounce the email instead. And what they've actually done, maybe knowingly or unknowingly, is they've set the precedent that they are more than happy to make fairly significant changes to email deliverability, things like DMARC, with only a week's notice. And a week is simply not enough time to be able to make the net relevant changes and get things fully up to speed. So it's incredibly important that we stay ahead of the curve here. PCI DSS and DORA. I put DORA in here. That's just a little glitch in my PowerPoint there. PCI DSS, for anybody not aware, payment card industry, I can't remember what the D stands for, but it's basically a security standard questionnaire that you need to fill out if you take payment cards. Requires you to have DMARC in place. And DORA, again, doesn't really apply to many UK organizations because it is an EU standard for primarily from financial organizations. But if you're a financial organization that is working with with EU companies, then you do need to be DORA compliant. DORA doesn't specifically mention that you need to have DMARC, but having DMARC in place will help you be compliant with quite a lot of the questions that DORA has. The other side of it is third-party contracts. Now, what I mean by this is there was a conversation that I had with a chief information security officer for an organization that had about 60,000 people working there, which is a lot. It's a big organization. And what he was saying to me was he's spending so much money on cybersecurity for all of his internal systems and processes and whatever else there is in place. He's got all the different cybersecurity the certificates in place like ISO 27001 and Cyber Essentials. But he was struggling the most with his supply chain. And he realized the risk was coming from them, not necessarily anything internally. And what he was saying was he's now going to start being really hard on the supply chain and the suppliers to them and starting to look to see if they have DMARC in place. And if they do not have it at P = quarantine or above, then he's going to either stop working with them or, especially for any new businesses coming in, he will definitely not work with them. So he is now basically mandating that his suppliers need to have DMARC enforcement in place, and being at that P = none stage is simply not enough. So actually, from a business perspective, if you're going out trying to win tender contracts, you would actually be in a much better position than maybe some of your competitors, because if you're at P = reject, you are in a position where you are presenting less risk to the client. And as a result, they're much more likely to go with you. And the other side of it is, well, cyber insurance. I'm sure many people on today's call have cyber insurance in place. And basically, cyber insurance can be reduced. The premiums for those can be reduced by having a strong DMARC record in place. One final thing, just to quickly show you, just to give you a bit of representation, what we're looking at here is statistics of the FTSE 100. So we've got 100 domains that have all been pulled through. And you can see that 39% of domains are not protected, which is, quite frankly, quite scary, considering they are some of the biggest companies in the UK. Just thought I'd leave that with you as a final pointer for us to kind of talk about for today. But that's everything from me. Craig, I'll hand back to you to finish everything off.
Brilliant. Thank you, Elliot. That's really, really helpful, very clear, and yeah, great overview. Thank you very much. I don't think at the moment we've had any questions in, so if you do have any questions for Elliot, please do quickly pop them in the chat box. Jess, have we had anything in the background that you've seen?
We have had a couple of questions in the Q&A section.
Oh, okay, I can't see them from here. That's my fault. Oh, yes, we can. Yeah, sorry, we have. They weren't refreshing my side. Thank you, Jess. Okay, yeah, so first question, Elliot, for you. How long does it typically take for an average business to get to P = reject?
Yeah, so this is primarily going to be dependent on the services that you're utilizing. So the guys obviously at OneFix are partnered with Sendmarc. Sendmarc have a kind of a managed service offering whereby they will guarantee to get to P = reject within 90 days. And that is a money back guarantee as well. Their average for that at the moment is actually about 54 days to do that, but the guarantee is 90 days. And no other service out there on the market actually provides a guarantee like that. So if you're to do it manually, it would be a lot longer. It would usually be, I mean, just to use an example, McDonald's are utilizing a third-party tool, but they're not doing it very well because they've been at P equals none for about 2 years now, just to give you some insight.
Oh, okay, that's great. Thank you. So if people, I mean, obviously there's various sizes of business that will be watching this. If people aren't sending 5,000 emails a day, you know, they're a small sender, do they need to worry about DMARC?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It is. Yeah, you do need to think about DMARC because it's not about being pushed. I actually did a webinar this morning for IT providers like the guys at OneFix, and we were talking about predictions for DMARC. And one of the things that we're looking at and we think is going to be happening very shortly is now that Microsoft is on board, they're going to start reducing that threshold down. So yes, to begin with, 5,000 emails per day is a lot, and many smaller organizations are not going to hit that. But that threshold will come down, and we've even seen just from the fact that Microsoft have said that they will they'll be more than happy to only give a week's notice, means that actually you could find yourself in a position where you send more emails per day than what what Microsoft is kind of dictating, and you can have email deliverability issues as a result, and you could actually find yourself maybe even having maybe domain reputation issues as well as a result of that. The flip side of it is the flip side of it is that Microsoft or Google or Yahoo, they do not care what service the email is coming from. They're only looking at where the email is coming from the domain itself. So what that means is, and this is a genuine example that we had a cleaning company once, which had maybe, I think it was about 30 people worked for them, and they sent somewhere in the region between like 200 and 500 emails per week. Really not high senders at all. But one day, not long after Google and Yahoo announced that you needed to have DMARC in place, they noticed that all of their invoices were going into the junk folder. And that was because it was going in, and that was going to, people utilizing Google and Yahoo. And because it's a cleaning company, everyone was a kind of a customer. They were a consumer they were utilizing Gmail addresses, basically. And that was, they're going, what's going on there? Why are those emails going into the junk folder? And it was because when they went into Sendmarc, we found that 15,000 emails per day were coming from their domain from threat actors. So threat actors were then sending out and just hammering their domain, sending out as many emails as they could. And because Microsoft, Google, and Yahoo, they do not care where those emails come from, they just went, oh, you're a bulk sender. We're going to classify you as one, and it means you need to have DMARC in place. And they didn't have one until then.
Right.
That's good to know. Yes, you do need to worry about it.
Brilliant. Thank you. For those that are non-technical, I guess if they're with, the question is, how do they know if they've got DMARC in place and what P equals stage they're on? I was going to say, if they're with us and they're a client, obviously they can just ping into the help desk. And for most of our clients, most people have opted into this as a managed service from us, so we're managing that. But if people on the call are not customers of ours, how do they know? How do they figure out what they're doing or what their IT team are doing?
Yeah, 100%. I'm actually going to share my screen again, if that's okay, just to show you how you can look this up. So there is a publicly available website that you can go onto today, and share it here, and it is tools.sendmarc.com. So this is Sendmarc's own tool. Now you can in here just type in your domain. So I've mentioned McDonald's already, so we'll do McDonald's again, and it will then tell you your domain safety score. And within here, it will say exactly what's going on. And if we drop down where it says view detailed report, it will tell you your DMARC policy. And we can see that McDonald's are set to none. And that's how you're able to easily identify. But really, if you're not wanting to go into this level of detail, just have a look at this impersonation score that we see here. That impersonation score, if it's on 3 out of 5 or below, so if it's 0, 1, or 2, or 3 out of 5, then your domain can be impersonated, which actually means McDonald's can be impersonated. And I actually did do that once. I have the evidence if anybody wants to see it. And you can, but basically, if you're on 4 out of 5, that means that you're on P equals quarantine. 5 out of 5 is P equals reject, is the general rule of thumb. There might be some other issues if you're on 4 out of 5, but add P equals reject, but we can treat that on a case-by-case basis.
Perfect. Thank you. Let me get back to the Q&A. Bear with me. Here we go. Final question. Once you have DMARC in place, do you need to I think you might have even covered this. Do you need to monitor it, or once it's done, do you not have to worry about it anymore? Is it set and forget?
It's one of those things where you do need to still have it in place, and you still need to monitor for it. So the reason why is it's worth remembering, and I mentioned this earlier on, that when you're at P equals reject, any emails that are failing SPF and DKIM will then be bounced, and that's what's going to happen. But as I mentioned before, computers are stupid, so they don't care if that's failing from a source that you genuinely use, or if that's failing because of a threat actor impersonating your domain. So if something breaks from one of your legitimate sources, your Microsoft, your MailChimps, then those legitimate emails will start bouncing. And we need to know about that immediately so we can prevent any issues with email deliverability. The other side of it is if you're maybe a slightly larger organization, then you might have scenarios whereby maybe an employee of yours starts utilizing a new tool. And they maybe moved away from HubSpot to MailChimp, and they maybe haven't told you about it. And if they've done that, then it means they're going to start sending out emails from a new service that hasn't been configured for SPF and DKIM. And it means all of those legitimate emails from this new service will start bouncing. And obviously the team at OneFix needs to be able to come in and make sure that that's all sorted and in place. And in order for that to happen, they need to be alerted against it. And that's where a tool comes in, like Sendmarc, to support in that scenario. If you had the raw reports that I showed you earlier on, there's no way that you would know about that.
Fantastic. That makes perfect sense. Thank you, Elliot. Great. I think that concludes all the questions. I will have one more check in case anything else has come in, but I think we're pretty much there. We are good. Jess has put a link in the chat, everybody. So there is a link there to request a full DMARC report from us. Jess has got something prepped there. So follow that link, fill that out. We can give you a report on where you stand at the moment and give you some assistance with that. I'd also like to say, again, thank you very much for coming to join us. For those of you that have come today, again, you'll get a follow-up from Jess just asking you for your address details. We're not trying to capture your address to send you anything bad. We have got some very kindly donated from Sendmarc and Brigantia. We've got some amazing Tony's Chocolonely chocolate. So we would love to send you a chocolate bar to say thank you for attending. So keep your eye out on your emails from Jess. She'll be following you up for an address to send you your chocolates. Thank you so much for your time, Elliot. Thank you for your time. That was really, really great. Very useful.
Very welcome.
I certainly learned a lot, so thank you. And I'm sure I'll see you all soon. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending. See you soon. Thanks.
Bye-bye.